If you've ever seen this channel, you notice that my most popular video is a video detailing the downfall of SpongeBob. Now obviously it was going to do well because it was detailing how Nickelodeon ruined one of the greatest shows of all time. And although it's a pretty solid video, I noticed it was missing one thing. It didn't give much context to that dark time period. Period where the series would get constant hate and where we would see moments that let us know that the show was changing for the worse. So that's what I'm doing today, trying to pinpoint the exact moment everything went wrong for SpongeBob, starting with the reason for the downfall in the first place. Chapter 1, the downfall.
Now before we continue, I need to give you a quick history lesson on why SpongeBob was supposed to end, but didn't. Steven Hillenburg basically goes to Nick and says, "Hey guys, I think it would be fitting if we just ended this show around the first movie." Nickelodeon says, no Steven. You understand the amount of money we are making off of this stupid little sponge? Look at him, that's billions of dollars. And then Steven says, yeah, but I don't want it to be one of those shows that just carry on. I'd much rather have a lasting impact and leave people with amazing memories after the show is done. You, Steven. Steven will ultimately lead the show, and although he would come back for later projects, he still had no real involvement in the day-to-day production for ongoing seasons. And you would assume that the show would have taken an immediate decline, but the show was still good for some years. And the next couple of seasons still had those writers who understand what made the show so great with its quick storytelling and humor. But that wouldn't last too long. Obviously, with any long-running show, people get replaced. And with these replacements, you bring people in the boardroom who don't know what the they're doing, leading to everything we see go wrong with SpongeBob today. No substance, not funny, character changes, no creative direction, and so much more. But we still need to answer the question on when did everything go wrong, leading us to chapter 2, research. First things first, I have to find a reliable source on some of the worst rated episodes in SpongeBob's history. And after doing tons and tons of searching, I found a lot of mixed opinions, but the overarching majority pointed out 2 episodes that people unanimously hated: Ink Lemonade and There's a Sponge in My Soup. But there was one problem. Every time I looked in the reviews, it was very vague. Whatever you do, stay away from these episodes. You will regret every second you watch this episode. Just stay away. And so after all this commotion and lack of detail, I had to take a look for myself. And in the episode, There's a Sponge in My Soup, where a bunch of hippies cause problems at the Krusty Krab, which sets up for the entire episode pretty much being about Mr. Krabs and SpongeBob pretty much trying to get them away from the restaurant. Well, it's mostly harmless. I've seen some people say they can't even get through the entire episode or just how bad it was, but to me, it was just cool. Nothing I'd ever think to be one of the worst episodes in SpongeBob. So I was kind of skeptical on my research, but then I watched Ink Lemonade, and it showed everything. And I mean everything that was wrong with the more recent seasons of SpongeBob. The moment the episode starts, we are met with loudness and stupidity. And I already knew I was gonna hate this episode, especially when we also got met with this nasty ass close-up they always do. The whole premise of this episode is that Patrick starts a lemonade stand and he uses Squidward's ink as supply to serve the customers. And the entire episode is Patrick scaring Squidward so that he gets more ink to profit off of him. It's not really entertaining, and if I had to describe the episode, it's more of a strange mix of sad, weird, and annoying. It's sad because we're watching Squidward literally get exploited and his life becoming an inconvenience just so Patrick can reap all the benefits and make money from it. But then it's weird because this just doesn't feel like a show that I grew up and loved watching, and it kind of feels completely different in a way. And it's annoying because of all the unnecessary wacky sound effects and obvious attempts at being funny by just being loud and obnoxious. And to make it all worse, I still don't have my questions answered on where everything went wrong, leading us to chapter 3, finding my answer. Both the Ink Lemonade and There's a Sponge in My Soup episodes both aired in season 11, and I know for a fact things went downhill way before this. And so I did more research until I came across the actual most hated episode in SpongeBob history. This episode embodied everything we hate about SpongeBob today: the lack of humor and overall creative direction, and even worse, completely changing the characters that we love most. Even more to my surprise, this started way earlier than I anticipated. Season 7, episode 5, A Pal for Gary. Now the episode starts off pretty harmless with SpongeBob feeling bad for leaving Gary at home alone. Whole time, Gary's living his best life, but SpongeBob still wants him to have that friend or some company, and so for whatever reason, he decides to go to a street vendor that tells him the pets that she is selling are dangerous, especially
especially around other pets. But SpongeBob doesn't listen and brings Fluffy home to Gary. And off rip, Gary doesn't want this monster to be with him. He legit even tries to kill Gary when Gary's trying to be nice. And SpongeBob doesn't peep a thing. No matter how many times Gary tries to warn SpongeBob about the dangers, SpongeBob simply dismisses him and gets to a point where Gary is fighting for his life for the entire night. Even when SpongeBob sees Fluffy trying to eat Gary, SpongeBob still gets mad at Gary. And then Gary has to save the day and defeat Fluffy, and SpongeBob still blames Gary. And to cap it all off, he takes Gary to work and makes him an employee for Mr. Krabs, pretty much making him a slave, when mind you, he was chilling all along in the first place. So with this being one of the worst rated episodes in SpongeBob's history, I completely understand why. You instantly feel bad for Gary for getting put in a less than fortunate situation, which our main character that we're supposed to love is constantly dismissing Gary's attempts of warning him. And yeah, the character of SpongeBob is usually dumb, but in the earlier seasons, he usually always made up for it by the end of the episode. But not this time. SpongeBob continues to blame Gary and not only makes you dislike the character, but the story itself. And it just pisses you off. It leaves you with no satisfaction whatsoever by the end of the episode. It just leaves you feeling bad or annoyed. And to make this all even worse, only a few episodes later, we would get the second most hated episode in the history of SpongeBob. Season 7, episode 11, One Course Meal. Where this episode just didn't feel good to watch, man. Plankton's up to his usual by trying to find the secret Krabby Patty formula. And Pearl walks in, which pretty much scares him off because in real life, whales consume a lot of plankton. But naturally, when he gets scared and runs off, this gives Mr. Krabs a great idea to make sure Plankton leaves him and his business alone. And that is to mentally torture this man into madness to the point where he goes insane and wants to off himself. SpongeBob even confronts Krabs about this behavior and asks, don't you think this has gone a little too far? And I mean, he brings a good point here because I mean, the whole goal was to get Plankton to stay away from the secret formula and the Krusty Krab in general. And I'm sure he achieved that, but Krabs thinks there's more torture and trauma to be done. So fast forward a little bit to the end of the episode, SpongeBob and Krabs set up a fake projector of whales to scare him as the show concludes. Both these episodes kind of ruined the good, fun-loving nature of the show that we all knew and loved. And I know some of you are going to disagree and probably argue that the downfall of SpongeBob came much earlier or much later, but I believe these episodes perfectly describe everything that would go wrong for the show in its future. But I could be yapping, man. Would love for you guys to let me know, when do you think SpongeBob took a dip in quality? But other than that, man, thank you for the support and everyone liking and subscribing, and I hope you have an amazing day and remember to stay blessed.